Excellency, very warm welcome to you on the India Hungary Dialogue platform. Our conversation today actually will also be the first episode to be aired this year. So let me convey my warm greetings and best wishes to you and also to everyone else for a very healthy, happy and successful new year.
Thank you.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary is responsible for Hungary's political and economic relations with other countries. And in that capacity, it is very well aware of the nature and strength of its ties with external partners. Now, India enjoys very close and warm relations with Hungary. So how do you see the growth of India-Hungary bilateral relations in recent years, especially in the economic sphere?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Ambassador, I'm very honored to be here today. I think it's a great initiative to have exchanges of views about Hungarian-Indian relationships. And the reason why I say this is because in the past 5 to 10 years, I think we've been going through a tremendous change in that respect. And our bilateral relationship has actually developed as never before. This is true for some sectors in the economy, on the one hand, as you mentioned, but it's also true in the political sphere, and it's also true in the cultural fields. I'm very glad actually to see that this bilateral relationship is one of the fastest growing and increasing in its intensity. If you take the economy, India is one of the biggest investors in Hungary, which is very welcome. I think we have created an economic environment which is very attractive to Indian companies, but also vice versa. Hungary has started an export campaign for Hungarian companies, and there is a growing number of Hungarian companies who can invest in India as such. These are very important aspects of these past few years, and I think we have to continue in that spirit, our bilateral relationship.
Yeah, very well said, Excellency. You have also personally made a lot of contribution to strengthening ties between our two countries. I still recall you having inaugurated the Film Festival of India in 2019. As a State Secretary in charge of security policy, you had also paid a visit to India in January 2019 to attend the Raisina Dialogue, which is a very important international conference to discuss some of the most challenging issues facing the humanity, and where global leaders from areas of policy, business, media, civil society, etc. gather to discuss cooperation on a wide range of policy matters. So I would be very happy to hear from you of some of your impressions of India during your last visit, and also in terms of our dialogue on security policy. How do you see some of the broad areas of overlap between the interests of India and Hungary, and how to strengthen this dialogue?
Well, first of all, for me it was a great event actually to attend and open the Indian Film Festival in Hungary, in Budapest in 2019. We watched together with you, Ambassador, a movie about Rabindranath Tagore, who has a great cult in Hungary anyway. So I think it was a very telling fact that Rabindranath Tagore is very well known here and is translated into Hungarian. On the other hand, I had the privilege to visit in India twice in the past few years. I attended, as you said, the Raisina Dialogue, which is one of the great global security policy events now, and I congratulate you on that, because there are not too many countries who can organize such global security policy events, but India is one of those, and not by chance. I mean, your geopolitical role is clearly growing. I mean, you are one of the emerging giants economically and politically And I think India has a very important regional stabilizing role. And that's where I think Hungary and India has a lot in common. We too think that regional cooperation is very important, and the dialogue with regional partners is a very excellent contribution to regional peace and stability. And basically, both countries are convinced that sovereignty is one of the major features or characteristics of a nation, of a country. And when I attended the Razina dialogue, and when my minister, Péter Szijjártó, attended it last year, and I was with him in his delegation, it was clear to us that India has very similar ideas about its sovereignty, its national identity, about its territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. So there I think there's a lot of overlap between our positions, and we have an interest in India becoming an even more important player in Asia and in fostering this kind of regional cooperation with smaller countries, with other countries, for the sake of lasting peace and stability in the region. And this has, of course, a global aspect too, because the security and stability in Southeast Asia has an impact on global stability, clearly. So that's where we don't put our emphasis in our relationship only on the economic aspects and cultural aspects, but also on this kind of political dialogue and exchange about security policy and other related issues.
The apex bilateral institution to promote economic cooperation between India and Hungary is the Joint Committee on Economic Cooperation. And several meetings of the Joint Committee have already been held. The last meeting of this committee was held 2 years ago in India. Now, how do you see that the Joint Committee meetings held so far have contributed to strengthening cooperation in the economic area between our two countries? And as the co-chair of the Joint Committee from the Hungarian side, what do you think should be the priorities and focus areas for the discussions that are coming up in future?
Definitely the Joint Committee on Economic Cooperation is the most important vehicle in increasing our bilateral trade and investments. And I think it's really time now to convene the committee. Of course, the global pandemic had a negative effect on this too, but we are very confident that in the foreseeable future we will have an opportunity to organize the sixth meeting of the committee and to discuss not only between the two governments and ministries, but also with the involvement of the companies, company leaders, big companies and also small and middle-sized companies, how we can create an even better environment for investments and how we can spread information about the opportunities in each other's countries for investments and how we can bring together directly more the companies to find their own way to increase their economic activity in each other's country, respectively. I think that's why it is very important to convene this meeting. And the figures are very good. In the past few years, I mean, there has been a real increase in the investments and in trade too. Of course, Hungary is a relatively small country compared to India, which is a huge country from our perspective. But that doesn't mean that we would not have ample opportunity to even increase this kind of exchange to higher levels. And I think we have created a very investment-friendly environment here, and Indian companies have already noticed that. So big companies, I think it's about 35 companies actually from India who have invested here. They have created jobs, 10,000 of jobs, which is very important for the Hungarian economy. But also the other way around, something has started from Hungary to India. And that's what we want to strengthen in the future too. If we look at what areas we could focus on, I think there's a long list of such possible areas, because from high-tech production to the IT industry, to artificial intelligence and other areas, even tourism could be one area where I think we could do more. because all our opportunities are not exhausted, and we have to do more. So there are many areas. Hungary is to some extent one of the great powers on thermal energy and on water management. I think that's a very important aspect, for example, from an Indian point of view, where water management, sewage, and other issues are a question for the future, how you can manage it better. And I think, for example, there is some kind of very special Hungarian expertise, which we have exported already to many countries, but which we are ready to export to India too. So both sides have an interest, and if we are clever enough, smart enough to find the best areas where we can cooperate more, then we can do a lot, and then this relationship can be deepened and widened in an unbelievable way, I would say.
You mentioned about cooperation in water, and we sincerely acknowledge the strengths of Hungarian companies and industry in this sector. And therefore, when our minister had come here for the water summit, we had also brought some companies, and they had very good discussion with the Hungarian side. Pursuant to that, also some companies from Hungary have now gone to India, and they are pursuing cooperation. So I hope this will fructify. Now, well, in order to strengthen dialogue and interaction between the businesses of two sides, there is a joint business council which is in operation since 1979. And the joint business council, JBC, has been set up under an agreement between the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry and between the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Again, they have had many meetings, and I believe that last time their meeting was held together with the meeting of the joint committee. Also in 2018, a delegation from India from the Council of EU Chambers of Commerce and Industry, they came to Hungary, and they had some very good and productive discussions with Hungarian Chamber of Engineers, with Hungarian Investment Promotion Agency, with Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and so on. So what I would like to hear from you as to how do you see these B2B dialogues, business to business dialogues have functioned so far? And is there anything that you think we can do to make this dialogue stronger?
Well, I agree with you that the direct relationship between the chambers is one of the pivotal areas, key areas, because they can bring together company level leaders directly, and to make this a living relationship, because those are the people who really know what their companies and the economy needs in both countries and how they can find the best way to get to each other. And I think there's a broader aspect here, because for India, it is very important to get access to European Union markets. And in that respect, Hungary is one of the best doors to enter this market, because what I mentioned, we have created this very beneficial investment environment here in the country. So if the chambers work closely together, if business-to-business contacts are flourishing, and more Indian and Hungarian entrepreneurs get acquainted personally with each other, they will spread out this idea that it is not that far away. Geographically, we seem to be far away, but in today's economy, that's not a real distance. So that it is possible, because sometimes I have the impression that some of the Hungarian entrepreneurs cannot imagine that they could find any real investment opportunities in India, because it's so far away, they don't know the market. But if these personal contacts are built up and they are widened, I think we have a good chance to have a better idea, and we have to disseminate information for that purpose. That's why tourism would be very important to be relived after this pandemic, and that's why the business-to-business, chamber-to-chamber, and people-to-people contacts are really very, very important.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Now, linked to this question actually is the part which relates to India, and which is that India is not only now the fifth largest economy in the world, but it is also a rapidly growing economy. There is a lot of scope for the companies from Hungary to increase their presence in India. If I speak about the current composition of bilateral trade, some of the major commodities include agriculture and food processing, auto components, pharmaceuticals, drugs, etc. So in these sectors specifically, and of course in many other sectors too, I see there is a huge amount of scope for Hungarian companies to increase their presence in India. And therefore, if you could tell us as to what Hungarian government and companies are planning in this regard, especially in these sectors, and including through either investment in India or making a joint venture or partnership with Indian companies, because in a few years of time, of course, India, as it grows and evolves into a bigger and bigger market, it will be equally important for Hungarian companies to be present in India.
That's why the Hungarian government has developed a 10-year export and investment strategy, which means that we want to bring Hungarian companies in a better position, not only have investments coming from abroad to Hungary, but also to balance that by fostering Hungarian investments abroad. And I think India is one of the countries where we have a lot to seek and where we have a lot to find, actually. Taking into account the distance and the lack of knowledge to some extent that we have to overcome. But we are on the right way in that respect. I think a lot has been done in the past 5 to 10 years. And that's why this 10-year plan is very important. And part of the plan is a principle that the government, Hungarian government, would like to increase the proportion of SMEs, small and middle-level enterprises, to 50% in these investments, which is, I think, a very good thing, because the SME level is the real fabric of an economy in a society. So if you strengthen the SME level, the smaller enterprises and smaller companies, then you have a more stable foundation for the whole economy. I think that's very similar in India. That doesn't exclude, of course, the big ones, because we need the big companies too. And there, India has many globally renowned, global important companies. Hungary is developing global brands as much as possible, and the foreign investments are very important in that respect too, that we build up these kind of brands. And then this can be taken into account by other countries as well. There's one more aspect which I would like to add to these previous thoughts, and that is that Indian companies, at least in our perception, are usually capital intensive and very ambitious. They have a global reach, a global look, global perspective, and that is matching the Hungarian market, which is a very open, very business and investor-friendly and dynamic market. So that's why in the past 10 years, so many Indian companies have found their opportunities here, and they came to invest here.
Excellency, we are living in the times of pandemic, and therefore my next observation or query is also linked to pandemic and economy. The ongoing COVID-19 crisis in the world has completely disrupted the supply chain and also economic activity. But it has also opened up new opportunities for cooperation. So I wanted to get your idea on how can India and Hungary increase their cooperation in the post-pandemic world, and what opportunities are there for us?
Well, I think one of the major lessons learned was during this pandemic that we have to diversify our supply chains. Some of these supply chains will shorten, some will be diversified, so that we are not relying only one single country or two countries, but on several countries, in a cooperative way. And in that respect, I think we can find new ways now. We're hopeful that in the foreseeable future we will overcome this difficult situation, and that with a renewed strength and with renewed ambition, we can diversify our supply chains as much as possible. Of course, there are objective limits on that. Geographical limits, political limits, whatever, economic, financial limits. But I think within that, there is a lot of leeway and a lot of room to maneuver. So that's where I hope that the Hungarian companies will realize, and the Indian companies will realize too, that we have still a huge headroom in our cooperation, huge headroom what we can fill with different types of investments and trade cooperation. You mentioned pharmaceuticals, which I did not, but it's a very important area too, not only in relation with the pandemic, but also in broader terms. Hungarian pharmaceutical companies are very active globally and quite advanced. I think India is similar in that respect, so the two could be matched somehow. Water management, again, high-tech IT aspects too. So agriculture, let's not forget about that, where Hungary is traditionally an advanced country. We have good methodologies within the agricultural sector. So all these areas are where I think production, investment, trade could be increased between the two countries. And finally, the protective gears, clothes, ventilators, which this pandemic has generated, that countries are now ready to produce themselves these equipment, is again a very important aspect, and we can help each other's country in case of an emergency in that respect too. So I think that's very much welcome too.
Is there any other comments or remarks that you would like to convey to our audience?
Well, maybe that traditionally the Hungarian-Indian relationship has been a very positive, very friendly, very cooperative relationship for many decades, or even hundreds of years, I would say. Both of our nations have a great history. Hungary has been a state for 1,100 years. India has a huge history, if I can use that word. And I think that brings us somehow together because we have mutual respect towards each other. We are having our dialogues and exchanges of views and cooperation on an equal basis, respecting each other. And we have many similarities in how we approach our own sovereignty. So that brings us very close, and let alone speaking about cultural aspects and other aspects. But these are forming a very, very solid basis for working more closely together. And as India is an emerging power, I think Hungary has a very significant interest in cooperating with you and in listening to you and trying to make the best use for both sides of this cooperation based on mutual respect. So we will work on that in the future too.
Well, thank you very much, Excellency, for speaking to us on the platform of India Hungary Dialogues. What you have said today, your remarks and your comments are not only very educative for our audience, but they will also bring forth in the strength of India-Hungary ties to the public, and also provide guidance for our work in future. So let me once again, on behalf of the Embassy of India and my own behalf, convey our very sincere thanks to you in person and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in general for your help and assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me for this discussion. Thank you.